Hi, so I'm going to do a few logical reasoning questions here. The first one is from Prep Test 76, section 2. This is on Law Hub, and the question is 22. So the argument's conclusion can be properly drawn if which one of the following is assumed. This is a sufficient assumption question. We're going to look for the conclusion, which I believe is the last sentence. We do have a conclusion indicator word here. Yeah, it does appear to be the conclusion, but let's read through to make sure. A tax preparation company automatically adds the following disclaimer to every email message sent to its clients. Any tax advice in this email should not be construed as advocating any violation of the provisions of the tax code. The only purpose this disclaimer could serve is to provide legal protection for the company. But if the email elsewhere suggests that the client do something illegal, then the disclaimer offers no legal protection. Their conclusion, so the disclaimer serves no purpose. Okay, so we're trying to figure out what we need to add to make the conclusion true, right? So if we add the assumption, then the conclusion will be guaranteed. Okay, so to kind of figure out like what we need to add, it can be helpful to figure out what a gap might be. But let's just look at what's their evidence that the disclaimer serves no purpose. So the first thing they say here is that the only purpose it could serve is to provide legal protection. Okay, so they're very clear that's the only purpose it could serve. And they say, but if the email elsewhere suggests the client do something illegal, then it offers no legal protection. So in this specific circumstance, it wouldn't offer any legal protection. And then based on that, they're saying it serves no purpose at all. So the only purpose it could serve is to provide legal protection. If in this other circumstance, right, of elsewhere in the email, they suggest they do something illegal, then it offers no legal protection. And then they're saying blanket, that means it serves no purpose at all. So what I would need to add is if the email doesn't suggest the client do something illegal elsewhere, then the disclaimer also offers no legal protection, right? Because they've told us a specific circumstance in which it would not offer legal protection. So we need to know that everything outside of that circumstance also would offer no legal protection, or also the disclaimer would offer no legal protection, right? Because then we would be able to say it does not serve the only purpose it could possibly serve. So this I would kind of look at as, so they say legal protection, that's the only thing that's the only purpose, right? So that's all we've got. Then we have if it suggests that they do something illegal. Right? Then we have no legal protection. Therefore, no purpose, right? So, and like no purpose at all, right? Like just the disclaimer serves no purpose. So what I want to know is what if the email doesn't suggest that they do something illegal, right? Would that disclaimer actually serve a purpose then potentially, right? So in order to cover this gap that they've left for us, right? They haven't covered the possibility that the email doesn't actually suggest that the client do something illegal, but the client, mistakenly construes or understands the email as advocating illegal action, they take illegal action, well, then you can, go back to the email, and rather than just being like, oh, well, the client saying, well, I understood it to mean X, Y, Z. Well, it's like, okay, well, you should not have understood it to mean that because we put a disclaimer that said it shouldn't be construed that way, right? So I think it's more about, is there potential that there would be an email that doesn't actually suggest that a client do something illegal, right? But like, if a client misunderstands it and they do something illegal, then the disclaimer would actually step in and protect the tax prep company. Okay, so yeah, let's just look through this. So if the email does not elsewhere suggest the client do anything illegal, so if not illegal, the company doesn't need legal protection, right? So if they don't need legal protection, then yeah, the disclaimer isn't serving any purpose. Its only purpose would be to provide legal protection, but if it's not needed, then yeah, so A works. So A should be the correct answer. And let's just, there we go. Okay. So A is the correct answer here. That's what we were looking for. I can show why the other ones are wrong. So if email messages sent by the tax preparation company do elsewhere suggest that the recipient do something illegal, we've already covered that circumstance, so we actually don't care about that. That's already covered, right? If that's the case, then the disclaimer doesn't offer legal protection, and that is the only possible purpose that it could serve. So yeah, that part is already covered. A disclaimer that is included in every email message sent by a company will tend to be ignored by recipients who have already received many emails from that company. That actually, it may be irrelevant to it providing legal protection to the company, right? So it's not about whether or not the recipients acknowledge it. It's about whether or not the law will acknowledge it in a circumstance where otherwise the company would be seen as in violation of the law. So that one's not relevant. At least some of the recipients of the company's emails will follow the advice contained in the body of at least some of the emails they receive. This is not going to guarantee the conclusion. And I do think that probably the language of at least some and at least some, I think that's a bit of a trap, because for certain types of questions, we do tend to want to lean more towards language like this. The actual content isn't good either, but I do think that that's why D is a bit of a trap, and that potentially, if you misunderstood this to be a necessary assumption or a required assumption question, right, that D would look more appealing. But yeah, not the correct answer. E, some of the tax preparation company's clients would try to illegally evade penalties if they knew how to do so. Okay, so they would try to do illegal things if they knew how to do so. That doesn't really matter, right? So we want to know whether or not the tax prep company will be held liable for those things, or if the disclaimer protects them. And we already know if the email suggests that they do something illegal, then they don't get protected. What if the email doesn't suggest they do something illegal? Then they go ahead and do something illegal. Well, that we would want to know about that. So that's what A gives us. Okay, so hopefully that makes more sense now. Definitely a tough one. Um, but hopefully that like analysis of where the gap is helpful, because it is fairly like formulaic, right? So they're like they have like a condition, and then all you have to do is find the negation of that condition, right? So like if we have A, then we know what happens. Well, what if we don't have A? We need to know what happens then as well if we're going to guarantee the conclusion, because that's like a broad conclusion that it's no purpose whatsoever. Um, and we also need to kind of match the strength of the conclusion to the assumption to some extent, right? Because that assumption has to get us all the way to the conclusion. So the conclusion's quite strongly worded, right? And so with sufficient assumption questions, it's okay to pick a strongly worded answer choice, right? That as long as it matches and fills that gap and guarantees the conclusion. There's really nothing wrong with a strongly worded answer choice for sufficient assumption questions.